so I had a problem with my computer. It kept spontaneously shutting down without warning. Now this sort of behavior is supposed to be, or is typically, a heat-related issue. If the computer gets too hot, it will shut off. And then reading on the forums, I find out that this particular computer, this is a Lenovo X230. Some of the Lenovos in general supposedly have issues like this due to a lack of thermal compound or thermal paste, or not enough thermal paste on the heatsink. So I thought I'd take mine apart and see if adding some extra thermal paste would alleviate this issue. And spoiler alert, it did. I've been using this computer for, well, granted it's only been a few weeks now, but without any issues since then. It has yet to shut off spontaneously by itself since I did this procedure. So I've taken computers apart before, desktop ones, bigger ones. This is the first time I've taken apart a laptop. These are quite a bit different as far as the way they're put together. So basically the way I approached this was I didn't know what held what together, and there's a bunch of tiny screws on this machine. So I just started taking apart every tiny screw I could find, which meant I took off some screws I didn't need to, but it turned out not to be detrimental in my case here. I don't recommend that. I'm not really going to provide any instructions here. This is just a look what I did kind of video. If you garner something from it useful, fantastic. And then I got to the part where I could just take the keyboard off, which the keyboard just sort of snaps in there. There are no screws holding that in place, at least on this computer. And then after removing several more screws and disconnecting a couple connection points, and the connection points on these laptops are quite interesting. So they're sort of, I don't know what they're technically called, but there's like these ribbon type connections. And eventually I got to the point where I could pull the whole motherboard out, and the heatsink is screwed onto the motherboard, but it's screwed on the bottom. So you have to pull the whole thing out and flip it over in order to unscrew the heatsink. And the heatsink is this copper piece here, and then the fan is attached to that. I looked at getting a new fan. You can buy the fan separately, or you can also buy a fan heatsink combo. And it's probably easier to buy the combo, but a little bit cheaper to buy just the fan, but only a little bit cheaper. Once I had the heatsink out, then I pulled out my little compound, which I picked up at the computer store for about $8. You can buy this online for about the same price. Brand that I chose just randomly was this Artic Silver 5, high density. It's a polysynthetic, whatever, thermal compound. I globbed a bit of this on there, so it had a nice even distribution over contact areas between the heatsink and the processor. Not sure if this is how you're supposed to do it. This is just how I did it. There's probably much more complex ways of doing this, and possibly better ways of doing this. So do your research. I did not do mine. So we'll just see how this works. And then it's basically, I just put everything back together the way I took it apart. And this was not that complicated. There was a decent number of things to keep track of. Mainly the screws. There were a lot of screws. then once I had it all back together, put the battery back in it and powered it up, and it worked, which made me very happy. So the moral to this story is, if your computer is randomly shutting off, probably a heat related issue, and you may be able to fix it with some additional thermal compound.